You are currently participating in the largest, most normalized scam in the modern economy, and you are doing it voluntarily. Look at your calendar right now. Look at your inbox. You probably worked 50 hours this week. You haven't stopped moving. You are exhausted. But if a crisis hit and you had to point to a single, tangible piece of high-leverage work you actually produced, something that a basic AI couldn't do in 3 seconds, you would freeze. Don't feel bad. You are functioning exactly the way the modern corporate machine designed you to. We are living through an epidemic of what researchers are quietly calling cognitive bankruptcy. I pulled the data on how the modern workforce actually spends its bandwidth, and honestly, it's terrifying. The headlines will tell you we are the most connected, hyper-optimized workforce in human history. That sounds like a society that figured it out. So why is everyone universally burned out and terrified of being laid off? Because the metrics are lying to you. A tiny fraction of elite performers who ruthlessly guard their attention drag the average output up for everyone else. The typical worker underneath that headline? They are completely paralyzed. They are drowning in phantom leverage, a version of productivity that looks phenomenal on a performance review but produces absolutely zero real-world value. Every generation in the workforce right now thinks they have the ultimate system, and every single generation has walked entirely blind into the exact same trap. Let's tear the numbers apart. Here is the secret nobody tells you about productivity statistics. The number that HR and management report is almost never the number that represents you. When we talk about hours worked, we are using a completely broken metric, because there is a version of time you can actually use to build your career, and there is a version of time that looks great on a timesheet but cannot buy you a shred of real leverage. Let's start with the older executives, the boomers. Remember Robert? 62 years old, VP of Operations, corner office, endless direct reports. By every outward measure of the corporate ladder, he has it figured out. Well, here are Robert's actual numbers. As a demographic, senior management controls the vast majority of corporate decision-making. Their average working hours are touted as 60-plus hours a week, but the median, the number that actually reflects Robert's reality, shows that up to 72% of that time is locked completely inside meetings. Now, a 60-hour work week might sound impressive until you run the actual cognitive math. According to Harvard Business Review, executives spend an average of 23 hours a week in meetings they themselves admit are completely unnecessary. Robert has accumulated decades of meeting equity, but here is the gut punch. His time is completely illiquid. If Robert needs to actually think critically, draft a strategy, or pivot the company, he cannot do it at work. He has to do it on a Sunday morning at his kitchen table. His calendar became the entire plan, and now the calendar prevents the actual work from happening. He played the corporate game perfectly, and it bankrupted his ability to execute. Then there's Ken, 45 years old, mid-level director. If executives are the generation everyone talks about, Gen X middle management is the generation nobody does. And their structural trap is the most dangerous one of all. Ken is the backbone. He watched the executives above him build wealth through FaceTime, but he is operating in a digital era. On paper, his output looks massive. He clears 200 emails a day, but Ken is drowning in tool debt. The average mid-market enterprise now deploys over 130 different SaaS applications. Ken is the human API router. According to the Asana Anatomy of Work Index, knowledge workers spend roughly 60% of their day on work about work, communicating, searching for information, and managing apps. Only 27% of their time goes to the skilled work they were actually hired to do. Let that gap land. Ken is spending 60% of his cognitive energy just routing information. And here is the psychological toll. Studies show the average worker context switches between apps over 1,200 times a day. Every switch drains a fraction of your executive function. Ken is highly paid, highly stressed, and functionally out of runway. He isn't building a bulletproof career, he is managing a digital assembly line, waiting for an algorithm to replace him. And then we have Marcus, 32 years old, millennial. He rejected the boomer meeting culture. He is the optimization junkie. He has Zapier automations, a perfectly color-coded Notion dashboard, and he worships at the altar of Inbox Zero. The cultural narrative told him that working smarter, not harder, was the ultimate leverage. So, what do Marcus's numbers look like? Millennials are having a bizarre professional moment. The sheer volume of tasks they complete per day has skyrocketed. Those are genuinely impressive numbers, and they tell a story of a generation that mastered the digital landscape. But here is what the headline hides. The biggest driver of Marcus's output is metawork. Metawork is the act of organizing, categorizing, and talking about work, rather than actually doing it. Marcus will spend 3 hours building a flawless, automated database to track a project that would have taken him 45 minutes to just sit down and finish. This is phantom leverage. Just like a house going up in value in a market you don't control, Marcus's productivity is artificially inflated by the software he uses, but it is entirely illiquid. He cannot trade his Notion templates for a promotion. He cannot convert 1,000 closed Slack tickets into a genuinely innovative idea. The output is real, technically, but it's locked behind digital walls. His entire professional value is tied to systems that can, and will, be automated away. Finally, there's Zoe, 24 years old, Gen Z, the most boundary-aware professional in corporate history. She knows what asynchronous work is. She talks about digital minimalism and posts TikToks about rejecting hustle culture. So, surely she is the one who escapes the trap, right? Not quite. Gen Z is the most technologically fluent generation alive. But here is the stat that stops me cold every single time I read it. According to recent psychological studies on workplace focus, the median sustained attention span on a single screen before context switching is now just 47 seconds. Zoe demands a 4-day workweek to combat burnout, but her burnout isn't coming from the volume of hours she works. It's coming from the mathematically bankrupt way she spends them. She is toggling between Slack, a Google Doc, and the TikTok algorithm hundreds of times an hour. She is performing the aesthetic of healthy boundaries in public, while her actual neurological ability to focus is collapsing in private. Knowing the vocabulary of mental health and productivity does not automatically mean understanding the brutal physics of deep work. Zoe isn't doomed, not even close. If she masters her attention, compounding focus at her age will make her completely unstoppable. The question is whether her actions will ever match her awareness. Let's pull the thread. Robert, Ken, Marcus, Zoe. 4 generations, 4 completely different sets of metrics, and underneath every single one of them, the exact same blind spot. A headline productivity metric that sounds impressive and a real, usable deep work output that is practically non-existent. Locked behind endless meetings, tool debt, metawork, and dopamine-shattered attention spans, they are busy, but they are absolutely broke when it comes to career leverage. You cannot out-hustle a system explicitly engineered to strip-mine your attention. Willpower is a myth. You have to ruthlessly alter your environment. So, before you log in tomorrow morning, I want you to ask yourself these 3 incredibly uncomfortable questions. Not for your boss, for your own survival. 1. How much of your workday is actually liquid? I'm not talking about answering emails. How many 90-minute blocks of pure, uninterrupted, airplane mode focus can you realistically access this week without the system punishing you? 2. If your company's internal communication tools went offline for a week, would you still know how to generate profit? Or is your entire professional identity just responding to other people's manufactured emergencies? 3. Is your career actually growing, or is your task count just inflating? There is a massive, permanent difference between building a rare, irreplaceable skill and just moving a digital card from doing to done. These are terrifying questions because they separate the people who look vital on a timesheet from the top 1% who are actually bulletproof when the layoffs come. You've seen the mechanics of the trap now. You cannot unsee them. The system wants you busy, distracted, and easily replaceable. The question is, what you decide to do about it tomorrow morning. Tell me in the comments, which generation's productivity trap hit you the hardest? Be honest, and share this video right now with that one coworker who you know is drowning in phantom leverage. They already feel the burnout, they just haven't seen the math yet. Hit subscribe to rewrite your system, and I'll see you in the next one.